here we are, still on volume 4, which is called Following in the Buddha's Footsteps. And it deals with refuge. And it starts out with refuge. And as part of refuge, when we look at the Dharma jewel that we take refuge in, then we have higher training of ethics and ethical conduct, higher training in concentration, higher training in wisdom. And so the rest of volume 4 is dealing with those 3. So we finished talking about higher training of ethical conduct. We're in the middle of talking about higher training in wisdom. Okay. Concentration. Thank you. That's what I meant. You should understand what I mean, not what I say. Yeah. Even if I don't know what I'm saying. Okay. So it's called these 3 are called the higher trainings because they are done with refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Yeah, the similar practices can be done by non-Buddhists, but they aren't called the higher trainings in ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, and even more than that, they don't become bodhisattva practices, these 3, unless it's motivated by a mind with bodhicitta that aspires for full awakening. So these are important distinctions to make. In other words, let's say the higher training in concentration isn't just, well, sit down and meditate on this object and blah, blah. It's, what is the worldview in which you're meditating? What is the context in which you're meditating? Why are you doing this meditation? So all of that is, clarified when we take refuge in the 3 jewels and when we generate bodhicitta. We know what path we're following and why we're following it. Yeah. So quite important, because I think I've told you before about, I heard of one rabbi who did a Zen retreat, and the conclusion he reached was that he's certain God exists. Well, that's not actually a Buddhist practice, even though it was called a Zen retreat, because his worldview, the context in which he was meditating, was different. Similarly, we had a young man come here last year, I think it was, or the year before, and he just wanted to generate concentration. He wanted the bliss of concentration. I asked him to help peel apples, because it was applesauce making season, and he left the next day because he wanted the bliss from developing concentration. But, his worldview didn't include any of that. His worldview was basically, I want bliss now. So it was for the happiness of this life. And so he's going to get a different kind of result from doing that same practice. Okay. So we will start as we usually do with the recitations. A little bit of silent meditation, generating our bodhicitta motivation. And before we do that, so I don't forget, is next week we won't have class because Geshe Samdup will be teaching. And so I really encourage people who, can attend those teachings live to do so, or if you can't, I think they're going to be on Zoom, right? YouTube. Okay, so you can also watch live streaming on YouTube. Okay, good. And he's teaching Atisha's Lamp of the Path to Awakening, which is a very special text. People say that that's kind of what led to Tsongkhapa's writing the, his different versions of the Lamrim, the Gradual Path to Awakening. Okay, so visualize the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front. And remember that we're taking refuge in them and leading all sentient beings to take refuge and to generate bodhicitta.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one that's found, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With your bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, o'erland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So let's generate our motivation. So it's easy to say and have the thought, oh, I'm doing this to benefit all sentient beings. There's some kind of amorphous group of smiling sentient beings who are very grateful to us, we think. But if we stop for a moment and think about the various experiences that different sentient beings are undergoing at this moment, beings in the different realms having such experiences either of pain or pleasure that we can't even imagine. And even in our human realm, some people now are awake, some are sleeping, some are in the middle of fighting a war, some are showing off their weapons. Some people are falling in love, some people are separating. At any given moment, there's such diversity in experience. And yet, beneath it all, what's common to each and every one of us is we want only happiness and we want to be free of all misery. Diverse experiences, unified wish. So since our very lives depend on others, it's only fair that we contribute to their well-being. And even though it would be wonderful to be a Buddha and be able to do so much to be of benefit, we aren't there yet. But at least we can generate the bodhicitta intention to become Buddhas so that we have the ability to benefit others most effectively. So that's an indirect benefit, but one day, by accumulating so many moments of generating bodhicitta, one day we'll be able to directly benefit countless beings. So take a moment and generate the bodhicitta. So we talked about the higher training in ethical conduct first, because that's the basis for practicing the higher trainings in concentration and wisdom. Yeah. And as we get deeper into the higher training in concentration, we begin to see how certain mental factors that were cultivated when we practice ethical conduct also have a role in practicing concentration. And that we start out becoming familiar with these mental factors in practicing ethical conduct, because that's easier, yeah? And then, because ethical conduct is especially geared towards actions of body and speech, which are much easier to control than our mental emotions and thoughts. Yeah. But developing, for example, mindfulness, introspective awareness, with the higher training in ethical conduct prepares us to practice the higher training in concentration. Yeah. Also, when we keep ethical conduct, it is easier to concentrate. We're not so distracted. Because what is it that distracts us? Yeah. Very often, we're angry at somebody, so we're thinking about how to retaliate or how to respond to what they're doing. Or we feel bad about something that we've said or done to somebody, and so we dwell in just kind of that yucky feeling. And so all of that disturbs our meditation. When we practice ethical conduct, then we don't have those kind of regrets, yeah? And we don't have that kind of turmoil in the mind, yeah? Okay, so we started last year, yeah, talking about the objects of when we practice the higher training and concentration. So we went through some of these objects. I want to review what we did before, and just to clarify that, they're talking about different categories of objects, but it doesn't mean that there's no overlap between these categories. There's a lot of overlap, okay, so the first category was extensive objects. The second one we'll do is objects for purifying behavior. Third is objects of expertise, and fourth is objects for purifying afflictions. So the first one, extensive objects. So just to refresh what we talked about last time. So of those extensive objects, there's 4 types. This is page 154. There's analytic objects, so that those are objects that are observed by insight. So you might be meditating, let's say, on impermanence, meditating on emptiness, something like that, where you have to do analysis. Those would fall under analytical images. Non-analytical images are ones where we just focus on the object, but we're not examining the characteristics of the object. Yeah. So for example, and we'll get to this when we talk about the Theravada tradition, for concentration, often what they use are these objects, of the 4 elements or the different colors, okay? So it might be like a sphere on a wooden like plank or cardboard, of earth, and you just focus on earth, okay? Or water, a dish of water, thing. So you might look and just focus on, without analyzing the element on it. Or it might be a different color. It might be, a sphere of red or a sphere of green or whatever it is, okay? So those would be non-analytic images. Then the third kind are the of extensive objects, and they're called extensive because there's a lot of them, okay? It doesn't mean we have to develop concentration on all of them, not at the beginning at least. Okay, the third one is the limits of existence. So here, this is talking about like a group of phenomena and what is the limit of what they can be. So if we're talking about impermanent phenomena, what is the limit of impermanent phenomena? It would be the 5 aggregates, yeah, because those contain all impermanent phenomena. The 4 truths are the limit of what is to be known, because they talk about our samsaric state and the enlightened state. Yeah. And then the 4th extensive object is the purpose that we seek to accomplish. So here, let's say if you aspire to become an arhat, you aspire to become a Buddha, you would focus on, what you're trying to attain. Okay. Then the next group of phenomena is called objects for purifying behavior. So I think I'll start reading from there, right? Okay, so meditation on an object for purifying behavior helps those whose behavior is dominated by a specific affliction to pacify that affliction. So they always, our teachers always say, know what is your primary or worst affliction, which one causes you the most trouble in your life. What do you fall off the cliff with, okay? And what affliction injures you and drives you crazy the most, okay? So that's very helpful to know, because then we should really focus on learning the antidotes and applying the antidotes to our worst affliction. We don't just pick something, well, I'm attached to, what am I? I'm attached to noodles cooked in Singapore. Okay, I'm attached to Singaporean noodles. Now, is that my greatest affliction? How often does that affliction arise? Probably only once in a while when I'm in Singapore. Okay? So to me to sit there and just go over and over to try and cut my attachment to Singaporean noodles, you know, there's other things. I'm sure you can all give me some suggestions about my worst affliction that I should concentrate on learning the antidotes for. Okay, so that's what causes the most problem. That's what I should focus on. Okay? Okay, the affliction is one that we have become familiar with over many lifetimes and is now prominent in our mind. Okay, so, we've had all of the afflictions since beginningless time. Some of them, we've been really cozy with, and they're kind of our MO, what we fall back on when, we don't know what to do. Some people, just instantly get discouraged, and some people instantly get angry, and some people, instantly, I don't know, go to sleep, forget about it all, but then they dream about it. So, we're very much creatures of habit. So to really see, which is the one that causes the most turbulence, okay? And that we're very, very familiar with. Okay, so 5 objects for purifying behavior are taught according to the afflictions that disturbs our mind the most. First one, okay, to counteract strong desire, our old friend of attachment, clinging attachment. Here, when we say the word desire, there's 2 kinds of desire. This is tricky about the English word desire. There's a kind of desire where you desire awakening. Okay, that's a virtuous kind of desire. Their desire means you want to attain it. That's very different than the desire to eat roasted almonds all the time. Okay, and whatever they do to your teeth. So, there's one desire that is affiliated with attachment and that creates problems. There's another, when we use the English word desire, that just means like we aspire for something, we want something, and it's virtuous. So don't get confused when you see the word desire. You have to look at the context it's being used in. Okay, so here, to counteract strong desire, we concentrate on the ugly aspect of the person or the thing to which we are attached. The meditation on the body to counteract sexual desire is an example of this. To investigate whether the body is attractive, we examine the different parts of the body: liver, muscles, blood, intestines, esophagus, wrinkled skin, broken toenails. It's really lovely, huh? So we examine the different parts of the body, or we look at the body as a corpse and imagine what it's going to look like when it's dead. And it's not when it's dead in a mortuary where they've made it up and they look better than they looked when they were alive and sick. Okay, one of the first funerals I went to was the mother of one of my friends in high school. And it was an open casket, and people were saying, "Oh, I've never seen her look so good," because she had been sick with Hodgkin's leukemia. Is it lymphoma? Yeah, and she had wasted away for years. Yeah, so it's thinking of, what her body was, how they embalm it with all sorts of chemicals and makeup and so on, and put your best dress on. They ask you when you bring a body to the mortuary to bring clothes that you think they would like to be dressed in. Yeah. So then the family has to go home and figure out what clothes, to bring. Well, some people like this outfit, some people like that outfit. Okay. So, looking at the body either as something that's foul or, when it's alive. I mean, it's a poop and pee and sweat and mucus and saliva and, factory, isn't it? Yeah. So just to see it for what it is, and also to think that when it dies, it's going to become a corpse, and the corpse in the natural state, the worms will eat it, the ants will tear at it, the birds will peck at it. Even if they don't, it's going to turn, blue and black and rot away and start to smell. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? When the body's alive, we decorate it with perfume and beautiful things, to cover its smell, because the basic smell of the body isn't something so nice. Is it? And especially when it's dead. When I was in Deer Park one summer, there was a young woman in Madison, Wisconsin, who didn't come home when she was supposed to, and people thought she disappeared, and the police were looking for the body. And they had looked all over, and then they finally, the street where the Dharma Center was on was actually in a suburb of Madison. But they decided that they couldn't find the body anywhere, they couldn't find her anywhere. So they came and they decided to look on the street that the Dharma Center was on. And they found her body by the smell. Yeah, somebody whoever had killed her, threw her body into the trees, because there was a lot of trees and brush around, and it had been there for some days, and it was decomposing. It was summertime, and it was very smelly. And that's how they found the body. So, the people who lived at the house, because they found the body down the hill a bit, where there was the trees and brush. But the people who lived at the house were saying, "Oh, we smelled something really strange for the last week or two. We thought maybe it was a deer who got hit by a car." And they were shocked to learn that it was actually a human body that they had been smelling. Yeah. So this is, when you do this meditation, it evokes some emotion, doesn't it? Because we don't usually think of our body this way. But it is the reality of the body, what it is and what it becomes. And so then the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are we so attached to it? Why are we so attached to somebody else's body, thinking that it's so good looking and it's soft and smooth and we want to touch it? Why are we attached to our own body, always thinking of its health and how it looks and so on? Yeah. So to start looking at least our own body as, this is the basis the physical basis of having a precious human life. We do need to take care of our body because it supports the consciousness. We use our mind stream to learn and practice the Dharma. And then taking care of this body is something meaningful, okay? But just indulging the pleasure of the body doesn't have much purpose in terms of the Dharma. And you can spend a lot of money on the body, can't you? Making it look beautiful, wear beautiful clothes, dyeing your hair, styling it in different ways. Yeah, do you like my new hairdo? I told you you would. Yeah. You jealous? Yeah. And, and putting perfume and colors on the body and pampering the body, the bed that's just the right softness or hardness or, whatever it is. So much time goes into trying to make this body comfortable. Is the body ever comfortable? Yeah? If you just look at your body right now, is it 100% comfortable? Or is there some discomfort somewhere? There's some discomfort, isn't there? Yeah? And so you wiggle and you change your position and you use a heating pad or you hold onto something high and let your body, the weight of your body, stretch you out. And then you think, oh, okay, I got rid of that. Then you sit down again and the body is now uncomfortable in a different part. Okay. So that's for strong desire, especially towards the body. If your strong desire is, chocolate chip cookies, then that's a little bit easier because sometimes there are chocolate chip cookies that don't taste too good. Yeah, they have too much sugar, they don't have enough sugar, they have semi-sweet chocolate chips when you want full milk chocolate chips. They're too big, they're not cooked enough, they're burnt. It's hard to get the perfect chocolate chip cookie. So it's easier maybe to let go of that thing, that attachment. But sometimes we'll take any kind of cookie, chocolate chip or not. Yeah. Okay, so then the second one, the object for purifying behavior is to subdue strong anger, our next favorite thing. Okay, strong anger, resentment, and animosity. So anger could be losing our temper right now. Resentment is we're fuming inside and we are planning our retaliation. Animosity is we're just have a really negative view towards someone. We just don't like them, period. Okay, so what do? We cultivate the opposite of that kind of animosity and dislike. So we cultivate serenity on the experience of love. Yeah, so wishing friends, strangers, and enemies to have happiness and its causes. Yeah. It's interesting, so much of our strong desire is for other human beings. So much of our strong anger, resentment, and animosity is also for other human beings. Yeah. So, to really cultivate the mind that wishes them well. Now, sometimes we have resistance to doing that. I don't want to wish them well. I want them to get hit by a truck. And I've told them they should go to hell. And, I don't want to say, may they have happiness and its causes. But think of it this way. If somebody harms you and that provokes your anger, that person who harms you did so because they were unhappy. Because if somebody's happy, they don't harm other people. Yeah, it's when they're unhappy, they're dissatisfied. Yeah, they feel oppressed or picked on or unappreciated, something like that. That's when they harm other people. So if you wish for this person to be well and happy, then they wouldn't be so obnoxious. They wouldn't be behaving in the way that you can't stand, because they would be peaceful, their minds would be satisfied. Yeah. So it makes sense to meditate on love for the people who you don't like or who you feel afraid of or whatever. Yeah. Because if they had happiness and its causes, they would be behaving in an entirely different way. Yeah, we usually don't think about that. Yeah, but it's true, isn't it? If the people in Washington were happy, satisfied people, yeah, I think policies would be different. If we were happy and satisfied, how we treated other people would be different. Yeah, because we can see in our own experience when, we're miserable, we take it out on others. Okay, the next one is when suffering from confusion. Yeah, so we meditate on the 12 links, the dependent process through which cyclic existence exists, seeing that there is no person who creates causes and experiences the results, or who cycles in samsara. We cultivate serenity on that. Okay? So we might take the 12 links of dependent origination, yeah, and meditate on them and going through them and seeing how one leads to the next and the different ways of arranging them according to how many lives they take and so on. But in the process of looking at the 12 links, is there a person that is doing each one of them? Yeah. And who is that person? So we begin to see, no, there's just a series of causes. One cause leads to the next, to the next, to the next. But that doesn't mean that there has to be a substantially existent person who is creating all those causes. Okay? A substantially existent person would probably be permanent. Yeah? And wouldn't change. If something doesn't change, how can it create causes? Yeah. So we begin to see that there's no findable person in that whole series of dependent arising. Yeah. And that settles our confusion. Because confusion is usually translating the word timug, and then ignorance translates the word marigpa. In some circumstances, those two mean the same thing. In other situations, they have different meanings. Okay. So, yeah, meditating on the 12 links, to do that, and like, okay, who who is creating this cause? Who is experiencing the result? Yeah. Does the same person create, the cause? Does the same person create ignorance and then do the action? Is it the same person? Well, we instantly say, yeah, it's the same person. Well, no, it's not, because when the ignorance arises, it's one person. The next moment, when they start acting out, when another affliction arises and the behavior starts, it's another person. Yeah, because they change moment by moment. Okay, then the fourth one, to purify conceit, we concentrate on the 5 mental and physical aggregates. Yeah, the 5 aggregates, the 12 sources. So the 6 sense objects and the 6 sense organs, or sense powers, I should say. The 18 constituents, where you have the 6 objects, the 6 powers, and the 6 consciousnesses. So it's lots of different ways to divide up phenomena, yeah. So focusing on these components dissolves the conceit of being a self separate from its parts. Because the detail and diversity of these things are difficult to understand, our conceit will decrease. Okay, so if you take, you're suffering from conceit, you think you're so great, I am the best rock shoveler in the Abbey. I can do, more rocks, than anybody else, especially the people who are just sitting at their desks, twiddling their thumbs, talking, when I'm out working with buckets of rocks. See? Okay. So you're proud about your rock shoveling. The other person's proud about how fast they can type. Yeah. So, everybody's a little bit proud in their own area. And somebody else is proud because they're mopping the floor. And, I'm the best person who mops the floor. Yeah. Yeah, whatever we do, we're always the best person who does it, aren't we? Nobody else can compete with us. Okay, but when we start dissecting the 5 aggregates, the 12 sources, the 18 constituents, to actually look at one action we do, like what is involved in, if you just see, take a few seconds here, what is involved in shoveling, getting one shovel full of rocks? Okay, where there's the rocks. Yeah, what sense do you use to know that there's rocks? Are you smelling them? No. What is it? Visual. Okay. Yeah. And the organ doing that? Eye organ. The consciousness seeing the rocks? Yeah. The visual consciousness. How about, but what says, these are the rocks I'm going to shovel? That's the mental consciousness. It has some mental factors with it. What? Huh? Discrimination. It has the 5 omnipresent, mental factors. Okay, it has discrimination. Maybe you like the rocks, maybe you don't. Some rocks are pretty, some aren't. Yeah. So there's going to be a pleasant feeling or an unpleasant feeling. some like, some dislike, yeah? And then you have to do the same thing to identify the shovel. And of course, you want the best shovel, yeah? The square one, yeah, it's better than the other ones? It's good for rocks, okay. Either that, or maybe you're one of the people on their knees with your gloves, hand clawing the rocks into a barrel, you know, looking at the people who are shoveling and saying they have it easy, and the people who are shoveling looking at you saying they have it easy. Yeah, and then you hear the sound of the rocks, kind of, yeah, take your hearing aids out when you shovel rocks. Okay, just a warning. Yeah. But when you really look at that one simple action, there's a lot of, you know, things involved in terms of objects and consciousnesses and sense powers and mental factors. And, you know, when you start dissecting all of that, yeah, well, first of all, it's hard to find the person or the action or the object, so it helps with conceit, but it also helps with conceit because there are so many things to think about, and to put them all together so they make sense is not so easy. Yeah. Okay. But the focusing on these components dissolves the conceit of being a self separate from its parts, because there's just so many parts. Yeah? And is the self totally unrelated to any of them? Is it any of them? You have that question too. Okay, then the fifth one is to pacify distracting and discursive thoughts. We meditate on the breath by observing inhalation and exhalation with or without counting the breaths. Okay, that's just how you would start. There's many ways to develop the breathing meditation. Okay, so we've covered two of the main categories, the extensive objects and the objects for purifying behavior. The next is objects of expertise. So objects of expertise are so called because becoming skilled or knowledgeable about them refutes a personal self and facilitates realizing emptiness. Meditation on any of the sets of objects below increases concentration as well as wisdom. Okay, so you'll see that some objects help develop both concentration and wisdom, some objects more concentration, some objects more insight. Okay, so here the first one is knowledgeable about the five aggregates. We know the I and mind do not exist separate from the aggregates. So this is, to develop concentration on this is going to have to be one of the analytical topics, okay? Because you're not going to just say, oh, you know, there's no I and mind that exists separate from the aggregates. It's easy to say, but to understand it and to focus on that, you have to understand it. Okay. With knowledge of the 18 constituents, we understand that they arise dependent on their respective causes and conditions. So the three objects, the six objects, the six sense powers, the six powers, and the six consciousnesses all, interrelate and affect each other. Yeah. So you really have to understand those and how they arise dependent on their own causes and conditions, and how they act as causes and conditions for other things. And the third one, skill in the 12 sources, is knowing that the 6 external sources are the object conditions of consciousness. So those mean external sources are the objects, what of sight, there's sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations. Yeah. So those are the objects of the object, what's called the object conditions of consciousness. The 6 internal sources are the dominant conditions of consciousness. So that refers to the powers, the sense powers. So you would have the subtle power, subtle visual power, the subtle auditory power, and so on. Yeah. And they're what links the object so that a consciousness arises that is reflecting the object. And the immediate preceding consciousness, which is included in the mental source, is the immediately preceding condition of the 6 consciousnesses. Okay, so there you have your 18. Yeah, and that shows you that, yeah, this is just understanding how these operate. Okay, then the 4th one is knowledge of the 12 links of dependent origination. So you see here some crossover with the previous category. It entails realizing impermanence, dukkha, and selflessness in relationship to the 12 links. Yeah, so to see how all those links are impermanent, how they are all causes, and being impermanent, they're causes for something that arises after them. They are in the nature of dukkha because they are under the influence of grasping at true existence. And they are selfless in that none of those things have any kind of truly existent essence. Or do they form a truly existent person? Okay, and then the 5th kind of this one, of the objects of expertise, is knowing appropriate and inappropriate results. And that's understanding that it is appropriate for fortunate ripening results to arise from virtue, but not from non-virtue. So this is talking about one of the first qualities of thinking about karma. Yeah, that happiness arises from virtue, never from non-virtue. Misery arises from non-virtue, never from virtue. Yeah, and then to put it in another way, virtue always always brings happiness, never misery, and non-virtue always brings misery, never happiness. So all these things are appropriate. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, it's hard to see, we can't see like, oh, it was because I, stole my sister's lollipop when I was 4 years old that, that is, creating the cause for something, never to get lollipops in future lives. Yeah, oh, what suffering. Yeah, and yeah, so it doesn't mean that you have to know the exact kind of cause, but just what is appropriate, like for virtue, sometimes creating virtue, the immediate result may be unpleasant. But here we're talking about the karmic result, yeah, that the result that the doing the action itself brings. Okay. So always knowing what's appropriate and what's inappropriate that way. Okay, then the next of these 4 great categories is called objects for purifying afflictions. So this is very similar for objects to purify actions. Yeah, because the actions depend on the afflictions, and the antidotes apply to the afflictions, but here it's similar but a little bit different. Okay, so objects for purifying afflictions are general antidotes to afflictions and help us to purify coarse and subtle afflictions in the desire, form, and formless realms by temporarily suppressing them with concentration and then cutting their root with wisdom. So here we're not suppressing them with the particular antidote to that particular affliction, like we were with the previous ones, the objects for pacifying behavior. Yeah, here we're using one overall strategy that results in suppressing all the coarse afflictions. Yeah, but it doesn't cut them off, and it doesn't touch the subtle afflictions. Okay, so objects for purifying afflictions are general antidotes to afflictions and help us to purify coarse and subtle afflictions of the desire, form, and formless realms by temporarily suppressing them with concentration and then cutting their root with wisdom. So that's saying why the higher training in concentration and in wisdom are important. Okay, to temporarily suppress afflictions, the meditation object is the coarseness of the lower levels of meditative absorptions and the peacefulness of the higher levels. Okay, so this is done to gain progressively higher levels of meditative absorption in the form and formless realms. Okay, so to start out, we're all in the desire realm right now. So the first thing we want to do is to be able to generate serenity and then up that serenity so that it enters into the first dhyana of the form realm. The form realm has 4 dhyanas, okay, and they go into increasing levels of concentration. So you get from the desire, all of our attachment to desire realm things, to a state of single-pointed concentration by first really contemplating all the defects of the desire realm. Oh yes, there's so many interesting objects, and I can have this and I can have that, and this is pretty and that's ugly, and this is more beautiful, and I want this and I want that. But when you really think about it, your mind is always just buzzing with, preferences and discriminations and likes and dislikes and dissatisfaction, because whatever we get in the desire realm, even if it's wonderful, it's impermanent, it's going to fade away, we're going to be separated from it. Yeah, and we as the one experiencing that are changing it, and so changing all the time. So even if we had that object for a long time, we're going to get bored with it and fed up with it. So you think about the defects of the desire realm, which is our present level of mind. And then you think, oh, if I could attain serenity, and especially attain the first dhyana, oh, my mind would be so peaceful. It wouldn't be so turbulent. Yeah. And so by seeing the defects of the lower realm, the desire realm, the peacefulness of the next level, the first dhyana, then you start meditating on your object and developing that level of concentration. Yeah. When you get to the first dhyana, initially it's like, this is great, but then it's still not so great. I'm still too close to the desire realm, and my mind, it gets distracted from time to time. I want the second dhyana. So you meditate there on the disadvantages of the first dhyana, and the peacefulness of the second one, and then that helps you to concentrate deeper and ups your concentration, so you attain the second dhyana. And so you can go through the 4 dhyanas, or jhanas is the Pali word, in the form realm. And then you can even see, the 4th dhyana is great, but the 4 meditative absorptions in the formless realm are even better. They're deeper, they last longer, the mind is free from kind of any agitated bliss. It's just completely equanimous. Yeah. And so you think of the benefits in that way, and then that helps your mind concentrate deeper, and you up it again. Okay, so here's what the text says. To temporarily suppress afflictions, the meditation object is the coarseness of the lower levels of meditative absorption and the peacefulness of the higher levels. This is done to gain progressively higher levels of meditative absorption in the form and formless realms. For example, someone who has attained the first dhyana and seeks to attain the second dhyana contemplates the first dhyana as coarse and the second one as peaceful. Through this, she will suppress the afflictions associated with the first dhyana, which are coarser, and attain the concentration of the second dhyana, where the afflictions aren't quite as coarse. Cutting the root, and so you can do all the way up, But even you get to the 4th one, of the 4th meditative absorption of the formless realm, okay, you're still in samsara. And so that's the hook, You still are grasping inherent existence. So, but cutting the root of afflictions is done by meditating on the 16 attributes of the 4 truths. So 16 attributes of impermanence, or the 4 attributes of true afflictions. True dukkha. Okay, so impermanence, the nature of dukkha, emptiness, selflessness, and then the 4 of each of the other, the 3 remaining truths of the 4 truths. Okay, combining serenity with insight into these 16 leads to attaining the Arya paths and liberation. Okay, so that's what we eventually want to get to, where you can combine serenity and insight. In addition to the 4 main categories of observed objects taught by the Buddha to cultivate serenity, other objects may be used with success. And so now His Holiness is going to talk about a few other objects that aren't included in the ones we just covered. Mm-hmm.
I'm a little confused about going up to the jhanas and then cutting the root of afflictions. You can't just meditate on the 16 attributes and go there. You have to go through all these other steps. I mean, how does that relate?
You need to have very deep concentration, because you have to have the unity of serenity and insight. So they say that you can attain it with a kind of thing that is just above serenity, you can use that level of concentration. But the Theravadas call that the dry, wizened arhat, because their mind isn't softened by serenity. In the Mahayana, they say the fourth dhyana is the most effective for cutting the root of afflictions. If you're on the bodhisattva path, you have to be able to do all of them, because if you want to become a Buddha, you're going to have to teach all of those to the different sentient beings who are interested in them.
I guess my confusion is that somehow, I've always had this, the idea of just meditating on the defects of a previous level does not sound like a very virtuous object, whereas going straight to wanting to look at the Four Truths or the 16 aspects is a very virtuous object.
Yes, and you can use one of those objects to up it, to the next level. But it seems like you have to want to get to the next level, or you're not going to get there. Okay? It's like, you could go to Seattle and you get to Spokane, but if you don't have the wish to get to Seattle, you're not going to go there. Okay? So it's not saying, I think, that the only way to do it is by seeing the defects of one and the peacefulness of the other. Yeah, but that's one way to do it. And if you can use the Four Truths as your object of meditation, then that's even better. Okay? Okay. Okay, so now here's the conventional nature of the mind. So this wasn't included in the previous ones. But the conventional nature of the mind may be the observed object. Here we focus on the mere clarity, sometimes it's called luminosity, and cognizance, or awareness, that is the mind. Okay, clarity, I don't understand why it's called luminosity. I don't know about you, but I hear luminosity and I think of a glowing light. Yeah, the mind is not a glowing light. Yeah, it's clear in a couple of ways. One is that it's not material, an object, it's formless. And another is it's clear in that it can reflect objects. Okay. And then cognizance means like aware, you can know the object. So those two qualities together, what is the mind? That which is clear and aware. Yeah. Okay, so the expression mind focuses on mind, which is what you're doing when you're meditating on the conventional nature of the mind. That expression does not mean that a single instance of mind looks at itself. Yeah, because they say one moment of mind cannot know itself in the same way that an acrobat cannot sit on their own shoulders. Thank you. Okay. So rather, one moment of mind focuses on the immediately preceding moment of mind. To do this requires understanding the mind's nature and being able to identify the mind. So we have a mind. Our mind's operating all the time. Do we have any awareness of what the mind alone is? Yeah. Not usually, because we're usually focused on external objects or internal feelings and emotions and thoughts and ruminations and things like that. Okay? So the mind itself resembles a crystal. When a crystal is placed on colored cloth, the color of the cloth is evident and prominent. but the clarity of the crystal is obscured. When the crystal is removed from the colored cloth, its own quality of clarity can be perceived. Okay. Similarly, the mind is distracted towards external objects and internal conceptualizations. Yeah, so when that's happening, its own clear and cognizant nature is obscured because we're focused on the object, yeah. But when it can be seen, when the mind can be seen alone, its qualities of clarity that reflects objects by arising in their aspect, and of cognizance that knows objects, their clarity and cognizant its clear and cognizant nature becomes evident. Words alone cannot give us the full flavor of clarity and cognizance. To know them, we must identify and experience them for ourselves. Sounds like it's easy, since our mind is always clear and cognizant, you know? We should be able to identify what it is. It's not so easy. Okay. Identifying the mind is not easy, as it is usually directed outward to sense objects or inward towards feelings of happiness and pain. The mind is covered by conceptions, thoughts and emotions, hopes and fears about the past and the future. Isn't it? All day long, buzz, 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 buzz. Yeah. To perceive the mind, we need to peel away these layers, capture the clear and cognizant nature of the mind, and stabilize our attention on it. Okay? The mind needs to become familiar with staying in the present. Then we will be able to see the true face of our mind. So we can't focus, you know, even though the observed object is the previous moment of mind. Yeah. We can't we have to focus just on that. Our mind has to be totally in the present to discern the clear and cognizant nature of the mind. Yeah, because as soon as we think of the past or future, we're not thinking about the nature of the mind, are we? You know, so you might think, okay, clarity, awareness, wonder what that means, I don't know. But clarity, yeah, it's like a mirror. A mirror is pretty clear, and you're often running, okay? Oh yeah, the mirror is pretty clear, but the mirror in the women's bathroom is always dirty. Whose job is it to clean that? Why don't I clean it? I need to look at the rota schedule and see. But it doesn't really matter. I can do it from other sentient beings. And, you know, and like clarity and cognizant, yeah. It's nice you're willing to clean the mirror for the benefit of, you know, your fellow monastics, but that's not what you're meditating on. Yeah. Okay. To identify the mind, look at an object with a muted, uniform color. Okay, so it's not going to be this, because the wood has different waves in it. Okay, maybe you can go in the meditation hall and just look at a wall. Okay, uniform color, well, actually, you know, it's a different color. They haven't painted the whole wall yet, so if you look carefully, you know, the part that got torn out and the top part, they're slightly different, and the texture is different, and you know, so finding some unified, with a muted color is not so easy. Okay. a muted uniform color. Gaze at it, but focus on the mind that is perceiving it. So you're putting your minds, your objects are focused on that, but you're not focused on looking at it. Okay, the focus is on, in this case, it would be the visual. What is the mind that is perceiving this uniform color? Yeah. Maintain a strong determination to maintain your focus on the mind without being distracted. When your mindfulness is strong, you will be able to immediately identify when the mind is distracted by an external object, such as a sound, or an internal object, such as a thought or feeling. By immediately identifying distractions as they arise and withdrawing your attention from them, so not following those distractions, return your focus to the perceiving mind. Gradually, these obscurations will cease, and you will perceive a stable, lucid state of mind. Okay, when the mind is able to remain in the present, undisturbed by thoughts of past and future, you may experience a vacuum. Okay, this is not the emptiness that is the ultimate truth, but an absence of the solidity you are accustomed to. Because usually with our senses, we're used to perceiving objects that have mass, that are solid. But the mind isn't made of atoms and molecules. It doesn't have mass. So that you may have an experience of a vacuum that's the opposite of the stuff that we're used to seeing, okay? The solidity that you are accustomed to. This experience of a vacuum arises because you are so habituated to external objects that when you remove your mind from them and stay in the present, you feel there is a vacuum, an absence. Buddhists are always talking about be in the present, be in the present, be in the present. Are we ever in the present? Where you remove your mind from all the external objects and just stay in the present and maybe feel like there's a vacuum, an absence of all the stuff that you're usually involved in. Now, when we say be in the present, it's like present bliss. I'm going to be in the presence of, some nice feeling and focus on that. How often do you have nice feelings that will last so you can continually focus on them? They soon become memories, don't they? And then we're focused on the memory of the nice feeling. And then craving arises because we want it again. Okay. As you continually increase the duration of this experience, you will have a glimpse of the clear and cognizant nature of the mind. That is, within the experience of the absence of sense stimuli, gradually the clarity and cognizance of the mind become more obvious. This is the conventional mind that is an object of meditation for developing serenity. So identifying the object of meditation, if you're using the conventional nature of the mind, that's difficult. That's not so easy. At first, you will be able to identify and remain focused on the clear and aware nature of the mind for only a short while. However, as you continue to practice, this time will be extended. You will begin to see that the mind is like a mirror, are like totally clear and still water. Yeah. When we hear that, are you seeing the mind as a mirror, or are you thinking about a mirror? You know, when you think, oh, I can see the mind totally clear, and the mind is like totally clear and still water. Yeah, do you have an image of clear water? Is that the mind? No. Okay. So we have the examples that are helpful, but they aren't the thing being exemplified. Objects can appear and disappear without disturbing the medium in which they arise. Noticing this, you will be able to observe your thoughts and perceptions without getting hooked by them. They will arise and pass away without ruffling the stillness of the mind. So this is a meditation technique that you may find in the Theravada tradition, just watching whatever arises in the mind. You're still focused on the object arising in the mind until the mind starts to be quiet, and then you might get a glimpse of the mind. It's also similar, I think, to some types of Dzogchen, yeah, where you're trying to see that. Yeah, but here it's, you know, for the purpose of developing concentration. Okay, so you can, all these thoughts and perceptions can arise, but you don't get hooked by them. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, they arise and pass away without ruffling the stillness of the mind. You know, so you're meditating, you got the clarity of the mind, and then a bird chirps. What's that bird chirping for? Don't they know that I'm trying to concentrate on the nature of the mind? And you're off and running, yeah. I like the Zen has one thing, like when a disciple came in and complained to their master, I'm meditating, and the flag moved, and the meditation master said, is it the flag that's moving, is the air that's moving, or is it the mind that's moving? It's usually the mind that's moving, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. But if your attention flags when you're meditating on the clarity and cognizance of the mind, remember a happy or a suffering experience, and without indulging in those feelings, use them to clearly identify the mind, and then return your concentration to the conventional nature of the mind. That's the antidote, but you're going to remember a happy experience and then be able to quickly shift to the mind that's perceiving it, or remember an unhappy experience and quickly shift to the mind that's experiencing that. So the challenge with using the mind as the observed object is that because it lacks form, we can easily slip into meditating on a mere conception of the lack of materiality. You know, so it's difficult to identify the clarity and cognizance. So it's just okay. It's the lack of materiality. Yeah, it's my meditation object is that feeling of vacuum that His Holiness mentioned. Okay, or we may also fall into blank-minded meditation on nothingness, in which case our object is nothing. How do you focus on nothing? Is nothing something? Okay. In both cases, we have lost the object of meditation. We may think we are meditating on the mind, but we are not. Longchen Rabjampa speaks of this in his Dzogchen writings and advises that to remedy it, practitioners purify the seeds of destructive karma, accumulate merit, study the teachings, and practice under the guidance of a qualified spiritual mentor. So the antidote to not being able to stay in the clear and cognizant nature, or even to identify it properly, is, purification, accumulation of merit, studying, and under a qualified teacher. Okay, so let's do the next section too. So this one is emptiness. So some people prefer to use emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, as their observed object for cultivating serenity. So this is kind of relating to your question. This is called seeking meditation on the basis of the view, and is possible only for practitioners with exceptionally sharp aptitude who have realized emptiness through reliable inference. So it's not just, oh yeah, I get emptiness. It's the absence of inherent existence. You have any idea what is the absence of inherent existence? Could you recognize it if you saw it? Yeah. And even if you could recognize it, is that a reliable inference? Because inference is the first step in validly or reliably knowing emptiness. Temporarily forsaking analysis on the ultimate mode of existence, they concentrate on a conceptual understanding of it. Okay, so you've done a lot of analysis to get to the valid inferential knowledge or realization of emptiness, and then you have to stop the analysis and just concentrate on the emptiness that you have realized through inference. And you're concentrating on a conceptual understanding of that emptiness. So the danger here is that if you lack clear ascertainment of emptiness, your focus on it may weaken, and you may meditate on nothingness instead. We're getting into the whole debate between Mahayana and Kamala Shila, the famous debate where the king asked Kamala Shila to come from India and the abbot Mahayana from China, and they had a debate about how to, what is the ultimate nature and how to develop concentration and so on. So coming right back to that. Okay, so the danger here is if you lack clear ascertainment of emptiness, your focus on it may weaken and you may meditate on nothingness instead. For this reason, most spiritual mentors recommend seeking the view on the basis of meditation. Okay, in other words, developing serenity first and then learning the view correctly, trying to generate an inference of the view. And they encourage first using the image of the Buddha or another object to gain serenity, and then look to attain a stable inferential realization of emptiness. So here, in describing using emptiness as your object, first you have to be a sharp faculty disciple that gets a conceptual realization of emptiness, inferential, and then you use that as your object of meditation. But that's not the recommended way because it's easy to fall into meditating on nothingness. So they usually recommend generating concentration and then trying to up your understanding of emptiness and get the reliable inference on it. Okay. So, questions, comments? Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the mind looking at the previous moments of mind, but that we're also gazing at, a solid wall. So is it that we're alternating moments of like the visual consciousness and mental consciousness?
No, they're just saying, you want to do something with your eyes, so you just put it on something that's bland, that's not going to distract you by seeing it.
Okay, so effectively, if one person gets to doing this meditation correctly, then in one moment, their object is the prior moments of mind, and the object of that moment of mind was then the prior one as well. And it's all mental consciousness then?
Yeah, okay. It's all mental consciousness. Okay. So you don't sit there and think, what's the prior moment of mind? Okay, which one? That one. Oh no, that's 2 moments ago. Oh, that one. Oh, that one is in the past also. No, don't go about it that way.
I've been reading some Low Rick and Dharmakirti, so that's, I think, the problem.
Good. Uh-huh.
So we have many sadhanas that invite us to meditate on emptiness and concentrate for a period of time, and it's a fantasy every time, because of course I'm not. I mean, where does that sit into this kind of instruction? Because it's like you want to fake it and like create the causes to at least someday be able to actually do it. Anyway, can you just speak to that?
This is why to actually do tantric meditation properly and derive benefit from it, you have to be very rooted in renunciation, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness, and have some concentration. Yeah. What we are doing now is just doing the sadhanas to plant seeds in the mind stream. Yeah. But, to really gain some kind of wisdom of emptiness, we have to identify the object of negation and go through all of that. Yeah. So if you want to in your sadhanas, you can start at that point when your gross body dissolves and do some meditation on emptiness, do the analysis and see what you come up with. So, or you can do that, or they say sometimes just remember the feeling you had from a previous time when you did that. Yeah. But again, it gives you something, or you just say, oh, there's no real I there, but who's the one who's thinking that? Yeah, it's not so easy. Yeah. So actually, let me finish this question. So what in the sadhana are you doing? You're trying to develop concentration on the clear appearance of yourself as the deity. That's where you do the concentration part. Mm-hmm.
How do we know which one of these objects to pick to develop concentration?
Okay, you write them all on a piece of paper, and you throw them in the air, and whichever one, you stick out your tongue, whichever one lands on your tongue, that's it. Another way is you see kind of what you're more attracted to. Yeah, because there may be different of these objects that, kind of pique your interest and that you would like to focus on more. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
So with the conventional nature of the mind, the instructions start at 60 miles an hour, so this is where it seems to me you'd really have to be doing this kind of work with a teacher one-on-one who really knows you deeply and knows your tendencies and your strengths.
Yeah.
And would lead you by the hand through this, right?
Yeah, I think with some of these subtler objects, yes, But even with grosser objects, they always say it's good if you're going to do retreat to be near other practitioners or be near your teacher, because all sorts of stuff comes up. Yeah. I remember one time there was one woman who was at the Abbey who went to do a shamatha retreat with Alex, and with Alan. And we bumped into her, do you remember, at some Dharma event. And we asked her, how's your retreat? And she said, oh, you got to be really prepared. All your emotional stuff comes up. Yeah. So you begin to, when she said that, it's like, oh, well, that's why our teachers tell us to learn the thought training practices and the Lam Rim, so that when that stuff comes up, you know how to process it. If you don't know thought training and Lam Rim, that comes up and it just totally takes over your mind. Yeah, and then you need to call a therapist because, your mind's just spinning with this and that and who knows what. Mm-hmm.
Venerable, how do you know when you're ready to really work on concentration?
I think it's nice if, to do a little bit of concentration meditation in our regular practice, but they say to actually develop it, then it requires being in a retreat situation. And then, after you develop it, what are you going to do with it? This is something that's very interesting. People who go on 3-year retreats, what do they do after the 3-year retreat? Yeah, very interesting. I have one friend who went to graduate school after doing a 3-year retreat. I know somebody else that, what did she do? Oh, she got ordained, and then she disrobed a year later. And then, people do all, somebody else, went and had a family. People do, so, it's good to develop some concentration, but to really think, oh, I'm going to develop it. I mean, if you spend a lot of time developing deep concentration, you have to be able to keep it up afterwards. It's not that, oh, now I have serenity, okay, now I can go and I can do this and that, and your serenity stays the same. It doesn't. Yeah. So, that's, I think, why our teachers really emphasize the Lam Rim, Lojong, 3 principal aspects of the path, and, developing a real good foundation in all these things. And then, then your mind has the correct perspective. when you do concentration meditation, when distractions come up, you know how to handle them. Yeah. We always want to jump to the highest thing. Yeah. And, and dealing with a mind that doesn't have concentration sometimes is thoroughly obnoxious, isn't it? It's like, I won't learn to concentrate just because I can't endure this mind that, is thinking about the color of somebody's shoelaces one moment and, what color is the platform for Kashidi Garba in the next moment. And, you're sick of that. So you have to do, gain some ability to quiet the mind, but to get good familiarity with the three principal aspects. Yeah, this is also why in the Bodhisattva path, you have renunciation, you generate bodhicitta. Yeah, that's already pretty hard. Okay, then you start, emphasizing generosity, and then ethical conduct and fortitude. Meditative stabilization's the fifth one. Yeah. So that's the point where, you really got to zero in so that you can have that concentration to meditate on emptiness and eliminate the defilements from the root. Okay. So His Holiness always says that our mind is something very complicated with many, many different aspects to it. And to become a Buddha, we have to develop all of those aspects. Yeah. So, slowly, slowly, we have lots of time in the future. Yeah. So just, So just, practice where you're at, build it up gradually. Okay, at least that's my understanding and my philosophy. You can always rush and try and do everything quick and see where you get. Yeah, but some of us know when we rush and try and do something quick, just in our ordinary life, it doesn't always turn out so well, does it? So, okay, so we'll stop here.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the Venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of wholesome teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering.
May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West. Forever.